All right, what is it? Oh, let me toggle this thing. I want to toggle this back to our ground with points option. Put my points on 10. And now I can display my contours and they won't take a long time to display. And what I wanted to just see is if we, I couldn't remember on this data set, if we have a, I think our stream is off to the side, outside of the project area. Oh no, there's one here. Yeah, we're reading up here. So down in, so I was doing that so I could see what we have for what kind of stream we have. What kind of, I think we've got some runoff over on this side. Be all right, and it comes down into this little area here in the lake. I think we'll just use this spot here. So if we wanted to do a couple of things here, we wanted to take and export a profile of what this looks like, the stream. Then one option we have, so I'm down in the southeast corner of this project area. And I can configure then my profile view so that it has the information. I showed you we can just, set up the display and take the graphical view of it. But the other thing we could do is set up cross-section, set up profiles and export that drape. So if I change my profile view here to say, let me adjust the ground points. I do this often, not in the classification source filter, but in the filter. It takes me a minute when I was like, why didn't it react? It didn't react because I was on classification pieces. We're not doing that. So on the filter, if I set it to ground, then it's displaying just my ground points. And I showed you earlier, we can toggle on the drape for that, right? And we can turn off the elevation and adjust, that as we desire, to get the content in there that we want. You might do something like, I might have drawn this a little crooked, and I could use the arrow, the left and right arrow key on my keyboard to align. If you're watching the profile view up here, I'm aligning the profile perpendicular to the stream. And then what we could do is we could take and export out that drape. We can do that in a couple different manners. So we can go to profile export settings once you've got your drape where you would like it. And we set a file for the export. This is my manual drape. You have a few different formats you can go to. Do a shape, you can do DXF, design. If you want to do DXF or design, I usually suggest that you do shape first and then convert it after you're happy with it because you want to make changes at all. And then the other options go to ASCII files. I'll set up a file. It's going to be a 3D shape file. And it's going to ask me to add that to my map. I'm going to say yes. It's come up with some automatic color on it. Maybe I'll thicken it up a little bit so we can see it in the map view easier. And maybe I'll even turn off my profile box for the moment so we can see when we export this drape. And we just do the export of the drape, or we create the drape in the file by clicking the next button over, which is to export the drape line to the file. Careful not to click it multiple times because it will just keep exporting additional features, even if you haven't moved your profile view. And if I turn off the drape, if I turn off the draped line in the profile, then I will see, because it created a 3D shapefile, then by default in the profile display properties under display feature layers, it's displaying that feature using the shape. That's the default for any 3D shape layer. Then I see it, I see that shape or that feature in my profile view. There's a tool bar in LP360 called, wrong thing off. There's a toolbar in LP360 called Feature Edit Toolbar. And the Feature Edit Toolbar allows us to do any edits of that feature. We can also just right click on a layer and bring up Feature Analyst. And Feature Analyst will list off all the features found in our feature file. And if we select the feature and go to vertices, then we can see all the vertices for that feature because it is a 3D feature. And the Feature Analyst, I've just minimized it a little bit here to show the Feature Analyst and the map and profile are all synchronized. So if I pick a vertex in Feature Analyst, then it shows me in the map view and the profile view, the selected feature is the cyan, the selected vertex is the cyan vertex. And if you were also wanting to have an ASCII file, the other way to do this is, rather than writing it to an ASCII file, we could also copy the contents of the rows of the vertices and paste that into a text file. You have some different options for how you can go about this.
Are the labels at the bottom of the profile the XY values? I can't read those on my screen.
So those are the graticules that I have set up, and so they're going to be in they are they're going to be the value. Which way was it here? So they're always going to be in stationing numbers from the start of the profile. Well, and that's done by the profile display. And it's in map units or number of lines that you specify. So in this case, I've specified every 10 map units. And so from the start, so from my left side of my profile, that's 11 meters over. This then ends up being 101 meters down the profile.
And that's not stored in the table, is it? That's just for reference.
The table, correct. That's correct. That's just reference. Yeah, that stationing is not stored in the vertex.
All right, thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, no worries.
So Esri has like the concept of graticules, and so it gives you the ability to control it by lat and long by default. So this always just uses map units, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
So if we want to create another profile along that same feature or along that same ditch that's over here, right? We're on our, switch back over to the pan here. Make sure that we're on, and we can scroll, turn back on the box so we can see where we're at. And we can scroll the profile. And then we could export another drape line to the file. Sometimes it doesn't display automatically. I just scroll off it and scroll back on it, and that gets the display to refresh, so I can see the new one that's displayed on here. Again, if I go to Feature Analyst, now we'll see there are 2 features, and we can go to the second feature by selecting it and see the vertices for it. It's a way to manually export out profiles. And it's all based on how you configure your profile view. Let's just go ahead and turn that off. I'll introduce you to another concept, and that is if we want to create, another thing we do is automatically export profiles, at some stationing along a center line. And we do that through a point cloud task. And a point cloud task is something that you'll see this afternoon are some of the various automation tools that are available in LP360. So there's a point cloud task tab. And within the point cloud task tab, we have, it has our various tasks that are available. We could just toggle off my profile view for a minute, makes things a little bit easier to look at. And then I'll take off my 3D viewer, simplify what we're looking at. So in the point cloud tasks, you have a list of all your available point cloud tasks. These are any tasks that you've created. By default, there are 3 or 4, maybe 5 default tasks that we include with the product. I've got a whole bunch of them because I've been creating a bunch of tasks for years. All the tasks are managed by the point cloud task manager, and you access the point cloud task manager by this gear and pencil in the top right hand side of the display of the point cloud task tab. That'll bring up the point cloud task manager, and we've added this to be able to make it easier to manage your point cloud tasks, to add and remove, etc. So there's different options here. You can import tasks from people, you can export them out to take them to other machines, that sort of thing. There are a number of different task types, and we can add a new task by saying add. And if we create a new task, we have to first pick the type of task. And there's a whole variety here depending on what you're trying to do. And what I'd like to do is show you how we can create cross sections using a point cloud task. And so we'll give it a name. I've just typically put a little prefix on my name so I remember what each one was for. And then the name of the task. So this will be my, let's call this my automatic profiles. It adds the task to your task list. And one thing that you can do is you can organize your tasks. So I might go to groups. I might add a group that is, say, my today's training class. And if I select the group, then I could select what tasks belong to the group. There's an additional thing that you can do, and that is when you have a group, you could also create favorites in the group. not necessary to create groups or favorites. They're just ways that you can have organization to your tasks. If from the task tab you double click the automatic profiles task that we created, then it will make that the default class or the default point cloud task in your point cloud task tab. And so your task should look like this. If you pick the wrong task type, then your parameters will look different because they'll look like whatever that task type was. So we're going to create some profiles and try to create some automatic profiles along here. And what we have are some in the task, there's some different input-output criteria. We can open up the manager. That brings up the IO manager. So I click the ellipses beside any input or output, and it'll bring us up the options that we have for setting those different values. There's different ways that you could drive these, where you can be very specific to shapes and files for feeding, or we can do tool geometry. Tool geometry is usually the best option when you can use it because it keeps tasks generic and we provide it the geometry at the time that we run. So I'm going to leave it as tool geometry. The input LAS layer is the next input requirement, and it sets it by default to the active LAS layer. That means whatever LAS layer I have defined here, doesn't matter what the name of it is, whatever one's my active one is the layer that it will run on. So again, to keep things generic, where I can reuse this on various projects and tasks, then I try to always keep tool geometry and LAS layer as my inputs, so that when I go to run the point cloud task, that I define what it is that I want to run when I run it. And so it makes it generic and I don't have to create multiples of these. This particular point cloud task has an output, and the output is we need to create a file, have a file that it writes these to. When I'm writing a file, I can either browse to the folder I want to put the file in, or to keep things generic, again, is we can make use of the project path to describe where to put that file. So I may call this my automatic sections.shape. The project path, if I hover over it, will expand it and show me where it's going to write that. And that project path is based on the project settings that I showed you at the very beginning, where it set a project path automatically based on where we loaded the data from. You can modify it, and you can also do things like, if I wanted to create a subfolder, I could create a subfolder that said profiles. And if that profile subfolder doesn't exist, then when I run the process here, LP360 will create that for me. You have options, usually with output data, where you can decide, do I overwrite, meaning if I run it more than once, do I overwrite the file, or do I append to the file? It just depends what you're doing. I'm going to leave it an overwrite in this case, and I'm going to have it automatically add the output to the map so that I can see it. So the only thing I did was set the path using the LP360 project path, and I got that in there, that variable in there by this less than greater than symbol up in the top right. I inserted that in. Then I typed in the rest of the values. Again, I do this to keep it generic. Right? If I can use tool geometry, LAS layer, and then always set it to some path relative to my project, then it will always have a place to write it to, and I don't have to worry about, oh, it wrote it in my old project or overwrote my old project, that sort of thing. Just some handy tips when you're trying to set up point cloud tasks. I've now set everything for input and output for this project based on the default, so I can close that. We're working in meters at the moment, so it's fine to leave the units in meters. If I wanted to, I could define this in feet. So if I wanted to profile every 100 feet and my data was in meters, then LP360 is smart enough to convert whatever units you specify here based on what the map is. So it'll convert it, and so we don't need to swap things back and forth. Our source points defines what points from the active LAS layer are going to be used for generating the profile. And so I'm going to click on source points, and what you're going to see is that it's going to pop up live view, or if you have live view open, it's going to switch what you're looking at in live view to be the source points filter that we're going to set up for this point cloud task. So it says PCT as the filter because it's the filter for this point cloud task. The default is to not do any filtering, except for if I've specified in my settings to do some filtering on flags, which is why it's defaulted with just flag filtering at the moment. In this case here, I want to turn off, or I want to look at just my ground. That's what I want to use for the profile. So I'm going to uncheck ground and then invert the selection so that I just have the ground points, and I click OK. So I'm doing some filtering for the source points. Then I could, I've got a few options. I can specify the length. What's the length of my section that I'm generating? Maybe I'll do a 25-meter section centered on the feature I'm going to give it. I could also clip those based on a polygon, so you have a few different options here of what to do. We can set either where it takes the section based on where I place a vertex in my tool geometry when I go to digitize, or I can just do a fixed interval, and maybe I'll do that at a 5-meter interval. There is an option to use break line enforcement, so you have ways of modifying the surface that you're going to be draping to. And you can create a file per cross section. So you have different options there. One option that you also have is to conflate your input geometry, where we give it a 2D line and it will conflate that center line as well. That's options. But I'm just not going to take any of the extra options. I'm going to apply to save. This is the old Esri thing where you apply to save things. Now to run this point cloud task, we need to open up the point cloud task toolbar. And that guy looks like this. There's a variety of ways to run tasks depending on the particular task type and what you're trying to do. And LP360 tries to be context sensitive, where it'll adjust the available tools for execution based on the task that you're running and the settings that you've elected to use. So I set my settings to tool geometry. This task requires having a center line along which we're going to generate profiles. So it needs to be fed a line, and that can be either done by feeding it a feature layer where a line already exists or multiple lines exist, or to draw the line ourselves. So I'm going to run it using the execute task by line string, where I'm going to draw in my stream center line, and it's going to create me a cross section every 5 meters along that line at a 25-meter length. So I execute task by line string, and now it's waiting for me to digitize the line string. So I can decide where I want to start and how many vertices I want to define that line string. Is pretty much up to me. So what I want to do, and then when I'm doing the last one, I double click it to complete, and that executes the profile. So it feeds that line string, and then every 5 meters along the line string, it happened to be that it picked a not so good color. So let me go to the table of contents. I'll thicken it up a little bit and change it to some color that's a little bit more visible in the map view here. So you can see the results. So these are 25-meter long lines that have been automatically extracted along the center line that I digitized. If I look at this and say, well, I probably didn't do a very good job, if I draw a profile, especially on one of these that's in the thicker part of the ditch, I didn't get the whole ditch in here. I probably need to make longer lines. I could change my point cloud task to say, instead of a 25-meter line, maybe I need to double that in size. And because in my IO, I told it to overwrite, then if I execute this again, it will delete the contents of the file and create a new file for me. So I can execute it again. Again, my option for how many vertexes I need, because I'm not using the vertex replacement. Double click to finish the execution. Right. And now we'll see some lines that are a little bit better along there. So that's a way to do automatic extraction of profiles along a stream center line. Again, you could feed an existing center line just as easily as you can digitize. You would just do that using the execute by feature layer. The nice thing that we can use here is part of Feature Analyst is we can move from feature to feature, and part of the options navigation is we could tell it how to navigate on the vertices of a feature. We do. Yeah. Center and hex would be all right. And if I'm on a vertex, then I've navigated to that first feature and the vertex for it. So there's some ways to kind of use, not only to recenter all along, but to move from feature. You can move from feature to feature, where you can get it to toggle over to the next feature profile. You could also have it. You could also drive map. So if I drive the map, I could just fit this way. And if I drive the map with the fitted, then I can drive the profile with the fitted. So you have a couple different ways of doing that, where I can either drive directly on the vertex, on the vertices, or I can drive to the feature itself. Window centering option just would change it so that feature will always be centered in my window. So it won't change the extents of your view. If you're navigating, it's often helpful to have the recenter extents, so that as you navigate, then you recenter on that piece. I usually find that kind of the quickest or easiest one to work with is to do the fit, and the fit will fit both views. but the it just fits the feature in, and what you'll see is that you can get rotated around, and that's where the vertex can be handy, because then you can fix the profile so that it's actually perpendicular to your feature. Right, so that was the option in the navigation. You decide how that goes. The perpendicular option here can be handy if I want to move along a feature and go from vertex to vertex and look at so if I had a stream center line and I just wanted to view the profiles, that would be a way I could do that. So there's a couple different ways then that we can use the feature analyst simply for helping with navigation to review our feature. And so this becomes a very nice tool to use. We can also use it in conjunction with all of our feature edit tools for actually making edits, removing vertices, changing the vertices that are on that line. And like I mentioned before, if you wanted the coordinates of the points along that vertex, you could always copy and save those out. So we used a point cloud task where we had set up in Point Cloud Task Manager by adding a new task of our task type or desired task type. When I did that, I had added that to a group, and I had created a group for this training. I guess this time around I called NRCS 2021-04, and I added that by checking that particular. And I had also added him as a favorite. What that does is if I filter, as I showed you, I've got this huge list of point cloud tasks for different things. If I filter by group, then I can pick my training group. And now the only point cloud task that's in this group is the one that I just created for this group. And there's a button up here because if I get multiple tasks, then I can pop around between them by clicking on the applicable button. For example, I created the September training a number of tasks, and I put different ones as favorites, and I can change quickly between my favorite ones for that group by clicking on the applicable favorite button. So the grouping, while not necessary, can be helpful for reducing a large list down to something that's applicable, maybe based on project type or things that you're trying to do. You might group, just depends on various scenarios. You come up with different ways of managing those groups and what content is there. That is a very quick introduction to the point cloud tasks, but it shows you some of what we can do with some of the incorporated automation tools, and we will be touching on those more this afternoon. So don't fret if you didn't quite understand it all. We'll revisit. Any questions on any of these? Kind of this quick introduction to the basics. So this afternoon we will look at some custom exercises to do some exercises we've put together in conjunction with a few members. I think two of the ones we're going to do today, we're working with Bethany and Jeremy on putting these together, solve some hopefully real world USDA desired problems and show you how we can use the LIDAR data to do some of that analysis and get some information. So we're going to be using, obviously the loading of the data and the views, but we're also going to get into using point cloud tasks and navigating through those. We will use the Feature Analyst to help with some of the navigation and review. So we will kind of revisit a few of these concepts this afternoon as we look at some particular project examples. If you have any questions, I can kind of go back over anything, try to clarify anything at this point. If not, then this would be a good time for us to take a lunch break and pick back up at 1 o'clock, working on the custom exercises.